We had two X-class solar flares this week on either side of the eclipse. So there's just all these things going on. And so I thought I would break down for those of you who are just starting to watch that at the beginning I always track the solar flares and tell you what I experienced, what I saw, what I gathered from Pam Youngins and space weather and whatnot. Okay. And then I'm going to go into drawing a picture about what this week is going to look like or what it's looked like, right? Okay. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. If this has any meaning to you, please like it, subscribe, put it on your schedule, and then pass it around because the more people we can get involved in this, the better. So let's dive in. I forgot to check. If anyone in the column wants to check, as a matter of fact, I can do it really quickly to see if the oh my goodness, to see if the geomagnetic storm has actually started. Let's see. No, not yet. Okay, so I just checked space weather. It hasn't started yet. Okay. Now, okay. Big flares this week, right? So we had two X-class and X7 on Tuesday, X7.1 and an X9.05 on Thursday. And Wednesday was the solar eclipse. So they sort of bookended on one side and the other. This solar eclipse, which was the end of the eclipse season, which started September 18th with the lunar eclipse, and then October 2nd with the solar eclipse. Okay. So in that time, we were doing a lot of work and then we had this huge rumbling. So an X class is going to be when it sort of shreds you and the attachment you have, and you start to float into what I'm going to call that Aquarian imagination. It's like when you start to realize that you're connected to things on a much different level and you get out of the density that happens with these consistent tower moments with the M's. Now, on top of that, I noticed that, Sunday we had a couple of high C's last week. Monday we had the highest M we had was an M7, and it was significantly high. I noticed that. I was like, oh, we're on our way to something. And I noticed, oh, we're getting closer to the eclipse. This will be interesting to see what happens. But there were 2 or 3 M classes and some C's at that time. Then I noticed that during the solar eclipse, we had 8 M class flares. Thursday, we had 7 M class. Friday, we had 9. Yesterday, we had 5, and we're already starting back up again. So the solar activity has increased. That's what I would say. The solar activity has increased. It had been quiet for a few weeks, and it was helpful for each of us to sort of integrate while we had some other huge things going on. So we'll get to that. So when we can measure through spaceweather.com, a solar flare or a release, a CME release from the Earth or from the sun towards the Earth, it can take up to 3 days. So what happened was on Tuesday's X7, we were just starting to wobble during the solar eclipse and the day after from that first one. So we might have thought that X9 was that we could feel it. What we were actually feeling was the 7. Excuse me, I'm so excited. I'm just spitting all over the place, right? What we were feeling was the X7 and not realizing that we hadn't even started to feel the X9 yet. So it was anticipated that it was going to hit late Friday night, early Saturday morning or Saturday, and it hasn't hit yet. We did have yesterday at about 6 p.m. Pam Youngins said, did anybody feel like a surge of power that kind of came in just for a short, just like a burst at about 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time yesterday, Saturday? And I was like, yes. I just went and sat down on the couch and got a glass of water and went, okay, maybe it's starting now. And then it didn't do anything else. So we're still waiting. And I just had this little bit of a dizziness come through right before I started this recording. So I think we are starting to feel the beginnings of this geomagnetic photon response to the X9. Okay. Now, per Pam Youngins, this X9 has been the biggest X since September 2017, and I think that was a M11. So we've had M11 or M13. I can't remember which one. There were a couple of them in there, and so we haven't had anything like this in 7 years, right? And that with this particular solar flare, she says that it's the detoxification that's starting to take place, and in some ways it's going to be emotional, and it also will be our mental constructs and stories we hold on to on things like old injuries, old illnesses, old surgeries. And so it makes sense to me, and we'll go into this with the astrology, that we're clearing emotional debris. We're clearing our attachment to these stories. Oh, this happened to me, and how it hurts, and we can't let it go. And it's where we're emotional, it's where we're reactive, it's where we have a whole lot of feelings. I noticed that from Tuesday, mostly Wednesday during the eclipse at about 12, I think it was at 12:39 Mountain Time, was that I was starting to feel tears right behind my eyes on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I was able to talk to a couple of my soul tribe members, right? Those women that just matter to me, and they were like, I feel like I'm getting ready to cry, and I said, well, I think it might be advantageous for us just to weep, just to let the crying out, because there's some emotional work going on that's intense, right? So keep in mind that whether it's just the solar flares or the eclipse on Wednesday, there's other things going on. And if you followed me over the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've been talking about those things, and I've done some deep dives. So by all means, go back to the biggest challenge, which is Pluto, and follow it from that week forward, right? Because what we're going to do is we're also going to hold that this Pluto in the 29 degrees is not going away, and now we're at the most intense peak of it on the heels of these two X class flares, and we may not be done. We may still be increasing. Oh, Carol, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. We may be increasing the solar flares while we're doing this because it's helping us. It's helping us energetically. Okay. So Pluto, and there have been times when I've shown the cards, is Scorpio. It's the deep dive to the bottom of the ocean. And according to Iris J, who does Madrona's Pulse, is that Pluto is soul deep. Soul, Soul. It's where everything in your stories, everything in this incarnation, everything that you hold on to is that we're experiencing things that our soul is trying to show us during this time, right? So Pluto went in, what was up dabbling in Aquarius for a little while, and then it went back into Capricorn on September 7th, right? And here's the chart that we've been using, September 7th. Well, Friday is this October 11th. So we've been doing this dive and this dive and this dive, and then here's where the eclipses started to happen. And we also have this other one, Mars, we're going to talk about. But we are 5 days at this point from the stopping point. So as you know, whether it's 5 days from a big trip, 5 days from the last day of a job, 5 days from closing on a house or moving, you know that chaos happens. You know that things start to happen, or it gets really, really, really tense, right? So I'm going to show you some cards. Here is what control, like tenseness, can look like in the most masculine form, right? This is the King of Swords. I don't particularly like this card for the King of Swords. However, it does show how you can grip in and try to control and try to get really precise with the things that you need to work on. I like to pair that with this guy, which is what happens when we have so many balls in the air and we're pretending like these things are not happening. And we know that all it takes is for one little tiny event to sort of knock us on our heels and knock us down, and all of these things fall onto the ground, right? And this is what happens when we carry burdens And if you look at this, this is the Six of Swords, and it's an interesting card because per Osho, this is you, and you're carrying all of these old stories, these romantic expectations, all of these flamboyant things that do not line up with you anymore, and you're exhausted. If you look really close, this character is just beat up and exhausted, and your ego's like, oh, I want to go do this and I want to go do that, right? Now, these are the two that I think are the most important to look at right now, because we have two things going on. The first one is that we are beginning to recognize that there are layers of us that we put out into the public, right? And I've talked about this in the last 2 weeks with Pluto. This is where the diplomatic, these are the shiny things that we put on ourselves. And this is what the solar eclipse absolutely went after, which is, what layer are you presenting to the world? Are you the mask? Are you the character? Do you think you're that hideous character underneath, or is there yet another layer to come off? And that's what's been happening this week. And then when we go over here to the emotional confusion, which is, I'm starting to rattle, and I don't know if what she's saying is her or what I think she's saying, and then she's saying, I don't know if it's him or what I think he's saying, and we're having all of this confusion, this emotional stories coming up. Seven of Cups, which makes sense to me that we're emotionally messes right now because things are pretty up in the air and intense, right? Most of us want to just curl in a ball. Some of us feel like we have so much pressure coming in from the outside, or we cannot stop those little voices in our heads that are like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Oh my God, this is horrible. I don't know. That's why I'm really glad that you're here, and we're sort of talking about how to break this apart, because we're going into those last 5 days. The last 5 days of Pluto before it goes direct, and then it starts its climb all the way up to November 19th. And then from this point forward, we're in Aquarius. Now, keep in mind, Pluto is this, because it's soul deep, Pluto works with our multidimensionality. It works with multiple layers. It's not something that's sort of linear that you can see, yet it's in Capricorn, which is a cardinal sign, right? And it's a leadership in the physical earth. So what it's showing you is that as we do this dive through the physical stuff, and we start to look at, where our stressors are, where we're controlling, where we're listening to the outer world and letting it affect us, where we want to curl in a ball and ignore it, right? It's up to us to interpret our life, our soul, and our experiences, and where we've gone after power, where power dynamics, both inside and out, where there's been revelations, and where our issues are up with intimacy with ourselves, intimacy with others. So the real big question is how are you doing? Because what we see on the outer world is reflective of what we're seeing in the inner world, and what our inner world is showing up in the outer world. And if you look at the outer world, it's we're going to go through that, right? It's a trip. And if the outer world is reflecting our inner world, how do we manage and experience that on a soul level differently? That's the invitation between now and the 11th, and then as we rebuild up to November 19th. So remember that it isn't just Pluto, that Mars is also in Cancer. Now Capricorn and Cancer are two astrological signs that are opposite each other, and they're in opposition. So Pluto over here in Capricorn and Mars in Cancer is pushing at the mental, the emotional, the soul memories. It's pushing at everything, right? Because they're opposites, and as cardinal signs, they're going to take us into a higher level of leadership, a higher level of digging into our emotional strengths, Mars, building our awareness, Pluto, pushing ourselves into action, especially about how to nurture and self-care and do the deeper dives, right? So this is where we need tremendous courage. I love how this woman is half beautiful young woman and half lion, and just showing you how ferocious she is, right? Okay, So I've got 5 tips for you. And before I do that, I want to just do a couple of things. Number one, there's a discussion group on Tuesday at 5 p.m. We're going to talk about this. So far, it's been fairly lightly attended. If there's a reason why you can't do it, please put that in the notes underneath this video on YouTube so that I can read it and respond. Tell me what time would be best for you. That would be awesome. And then the other thing is that let's look at this as how do we do reciprocal work, which is I spend all week gathering information and I can hardly wait to get here and sort of guide you, show you, explain to you what might be going on. And that is a service that would be really helpful if you could give something back to me, which might look like a cup of coffee, might look like a book a session, or put an explanation of like what you're experiencing in the notes, so that there's reciprocity. Because I think that's the word that we want to start bringing into this Aquarian age, is that we're reciprocal. We share, we give to each other, we support one another. So I'm asking, as always, to be reciprocal and support this video. So I have 5 tips for you. So the first one is basically take care of your nervous system. Because with all this energy jumping around, you're edgy, you're exhausted, you're anxious, right? Over here. So it's time to take salt baths, to rest, to be gentle, to nurture yourself, to nurture your kids, to nurture your animals, to look around and say, who is struggling during this beyond the obvious national and global struggles? What we're looking at is take care of your nervous system, balance your nervous system, right? Number 2, nurture. Find out what it means to you. If you don't understand nurture, if you don't have a relationship with nurture, it's time to go look at that. Like, what does that actually mean to me? Because we can say, oh, I know how to nurture myself, but until you go look it up in the dictionaries, get some perspectives of what it actually is, and then go, do I do that? How do I do that? What's my relationship? What's my ability to nurture myself and others? Because it's all up right now. It's all up right now, and it will be for months, because while Mars is pushing in in Cancer, Mars is going to keep saying, how's your home? How's your hearth? How are you taking care of your body? And what actions are you taking to actually nurture? Because Mars is the action planet, right? So maybe one thing to do is think about a person or a time in your past where you felt most nurtured, most held, and then go copy that. Which is like when you're really tired, does someone come and go, hey, can I make you a cup of tea? Why don't you just sit down in what? Is there a book you want to read? Here's a warm blanket. When someone comes, I have these really big overstuffed couches and a teapot. And you can imagine my house is very much of a Cancer house. It's very nurturing, very warm. And so I know how to take care of myself when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And if somebody comes over, the first thing I do is I feed them. I get them a warm beverage. I might make something from scratch. We will just be held and nurtured. So look at your relationship with being nurtured and start to do that. Number 3, I love this one. Create a different relationship with time. Because as Pluto heads into Aquarius on November 19th, we're going to shift from this very solid, deep, land grounded base, earth based time shift into something that's more about entanglements, more about connection, more about the way that we navigate. And so look up the word entangle, right? Which is interwoven. It's where there's connectedness, sometimes even complicated connectedness. It's where we're intertwined or interlaced with one another. And so we're going to sort of free from the, I do this to my house, I do this with my children, I do this with a lot of humans on a lot of levels constantly, right? So we're looking at how we're interconnected, and we want to look at how time does that. So I like the idea of working with the spider web, and I was going to bring my little spider in here and I did forget, so I apologize. think of the spider web. It's across time and space. It might be very big, it might be very small, but it has a vibration to it. And so the vibration is what the spider pays attention to. The vibration is what matters to the spider. It doesn't look at the time. It doesn't go at 12 o'clock, this should happen. At 3 o'clock, this should happen. It just pays attention to the vibration. So what we're really doing is we're creating a different relationship away from the clock and trusting our internal guidance to say, now's the time to do this. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm responding to. And this is what my body and maybe my family or my partner or my company, this is what we need at this time, right? Number 4, know that today, this week until Friday, you are in it. Really go, I'm in it. Clear the decks. Like, no, stay away from me. I got 5 days of being in it. Anything that I haven't gone and dug up through my Pluto, everything that I've been ignoring, everything that I have not held onto with sacredness is up, right? Because we're diving to the bottom of the depths of Pluto in Capricorn. And so what we want you to do is look at things with different eyes. Look at things through your heart experiences and acknowledge, what is it that I know that's going on right now, and what is it that I feel like it's time to pay more attention to and do. So just know for the next 5 days, it is up, right? And then the last one is to have compassion. And I'm going to take that a tad bit bigger, right? Whether it's the news, whether it's the hurricane disasters, whether it's the political positioning and name calling, whether it's the exposures of Diddy and the entertainment, political, religious significances of that. It's all going to impact us differently. What we're seeing is our outer world is starting to fall apart as our inner world aligns with new truths. And so it's being shook, right? And this shaking up is creating a massive amount of stress and fear and sadness and anger and helplessness in each of us. So we're all going to navigate right now differently. And what we need to do is hold compassion for ourselves and what we're experiencing, and then compassion for those around us, even those we don't know, as they navigate through all of this together. So if you want to talk about this, come to discussion. I would love to meet you. I would love to build this. So thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And as I said, pass this around if it's helpful. And I will see you next week on the flip side when we're back on our way up to Aquarius. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.